Take your browsers over to supertalktv.com. You'll see I'm not alone in the studio today. In fact, I've got Miss Chesley George. She is an artist from Pascagoula, but now moved to Central Mississippi, who is making, or I should say, transforming oyster shells into one-of-a-kind centerpieces and so much more. So welcome.
It's nice to be here.
It's good to have you here, and it's always good to hear about people who take their gifts and talents and then turn them into side hustles, which then turn into passion businesses, which then lead into, you never know what something's going to grow into, which I'd have to say you probably didn't realize when you first started with your art as for gifts for family and friends that you would end up here today talking about it.
I did not think it would happen, and I have I've been doing this for, I'll start out saying that I grew up, in Pascagoula, and my sister and I, when we were little, we would catch blue crabs, and we would, clean the shells and stuff, and we would dry the shells out, and at Christmas time, we would make ornaments with the blue crabs. So we did that for years, and then after I had my second daughter, my mom brought some shells up to me, and I went through the process of painting the Santas on the blue crab shells. And I didn't care for it because if you drop it, it shatters immediately. So in 2019, she brought me a bucket of oyster shells up and said, well, maybe you'll like these better. So let's give that a shot. So
have you always had kind of like the artistic bug? Were you that one in your family that would get crafty?
I did. I was always in trouble in school for doodling and not doing my work. So that's what I did. And I always made things. I would find driftwood when we went out to the island and make signs for my dad on his shed and do things like that.
For those of us who never grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast or in Pascagoula and have kind of that waterway that washes up, I mean, you mentioned your mom just brought you a bucket of oyster shells to the hospital or wherever after you had your baby. I mean, is that common? Do people who grow up on the coastal part just, do they have access? Like, would that be something like, so for us here, so many of us grew up making things out of pine cones, right, or making things out of those type of things that would just be scattered around, the kind of arts and crafts. Is it kind of like that? They're just scattered around out there if you have access to the
kind of like
beaches?
That. She didn't bring them to me after I had the baby. Baby was 2 years old.
Okay.
So she.
I was like, we all get gifts whenever we've had kids.
No, she brought them, and she had been. So there's a place in Pascagoula called Hopper's Oysters, and they dump the shells out there.
Gotcha.
So we'll go. We can go there. There's places like that all along the coast, but also you can just go down the beach or out to the islands. We went to Pensacola this weekend, and I was walking, and I found a couple of shells that I put in my pocket because they were just right. And I don't pick. We don't pick up just any shell. I'm very particular about, what I use. But that's what, if anybody wants to pick up a craft like that, it's easy to find.
It's easy to find, but it's not easy to turn into something as beautiful as you've figured out how to do, Chelsea. So
right.
If they are looking, they can see right in front of you. You have taken these oyster shells and you have created a beautiful magnolia, which, I mean, obviously that's Mississippi's state flower.
Yeah.
I was like, bird is not a bird, not a song. I'm like, it's a flower. And so we all have the connection to the image of magnolia. And if you have a magnolia tree in your yard, you know that sweet smell that they provide, and they don't last long. Everyone likes to pick them, and then they like to sit them on their pretty pottery or wherever it may be and know that, that's not going to last long. But this one will last forever.
Yes.
So of all the things that you could have created out of oyster shells, Chelsea, where did the inspiration of seeing the magnolia? Because I feel like that's something you had to see to build.
It
makes
came,
sense now.
It came by accident. So when she brought me the shells, I did ornaments for Christmas. She brought them to me in October of 2019, and I sold a bunch of ornaments, and I really, found out that I liked creating again. It had been years since I'd picked things up after having small children. It's hard to pick something like that back up. So in January, I still had oyster shells left over, and I just started kind of messing around with them. And I made a pumpkin out of one, just kind of sculpted it and put a stick up top and painted it green. And then I posted that on Facebook, and everybody was like, oh, well, I would buy that. I want a pumpkin. So I started to make another one, and I got like halfway through with it. I'd put 5 shells together, and I flipped it over, and I was like, ooh, that looks like a flower. Oh, that looks like a magnolia. So then I thought,
sorry, pumpkin.
yeah, no more pumpkins. I did not make another pumpkin. So then I was like, okay, well, somebody has to have already done this. Let me go look. So I get on Google and I really don't find anything. And I get on Facebook and search oyster shell magnolia and I don't find much. I did end up, I can't remember the keywords I Googled, but I came across one that I found, but it wasn't, I mean, it was neat, but it wasn't what I wanted. I knew that when I figured out what I wanted to do, that I wanted it to be one of a kind. I wanted it to, when somebody sees this, they don't even have to flip it over and look at the bottom to know who made it. So that's when I set out, and I spent 2 years getting it to this point of finding materials to use, picking up shells. My husband, it was his idea to do the pine cone in the middle. I had wrapped some wire at one point, pulled moss off of a tree and painted it gold, but the pine cone has been...
Oh, yeah, it's the perfect... I mean, now
perfect.
that you say that, I'm like, I couldn't see anything else
Right.
being sort of in the middle. Being from the Gulf Coast, growing up in Pascagoula, and this shows me not knowing my magnolias. Do they grow... I mean, do they grow down there? What's your connection to like... I mean, we all know Mississippi magnolia or
Right.
southern magnolias. I get that part. But, like, here we're in central location. I mean, you drive down where I'm from, magnolias are everywhere.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a part of our everyday or our yearly kind of blooming season. Is it
Right.
that way in Pascagoula?
It is, and magnolias are special to me because in my neighborhood growing up, my best friend Colton and I, we stayed in a magnolia tree majority of the time. We climbed that magnolia tree all summer, winter, built forts up in it, and so when I see any type of magnolia art, I think of that. I think of him and I think of our time we spent together. So that's what, when I did this, I wanted, magnolias are special to a lot of people for
Yeah.
different reasons. So I wanted them to see that and it means something to them, and that's why they want to
They're
get it.
also special to people outside of Mississippi borders. I mean,
Right.
it's special to us, but, just that southern magnolia is just a staple kind of
Yes.
flower. The image just brings about, like you mentioned, sort of memories and nostalgia for
Right.
a large number of people. And so your first one that you made, who got to keep it, or where did you show it, or what happened next?
I gave it to my mom, and I posted on Facebook, and they all sold. And then I think I made another batch.
What should I say, too? Wait, it's like a good recipe. You mentioned you worked 2 years on it.
Right.
When you had that one that was finally, or maybe how many different versions of it? I know the middle with the pine cone was a big deal.
Right.
But what were some of the other, like how many versions of the oyster magnolia did you kind of go through till you got to the one? And then what was it like to look at it and go, that's Chesley George?
Right. I think I went through about 7 batches because I look at ones that I've sold before and I love them because, they were part of that creative process. But I hate them at the same time because I was like, I could have done better.
But you didn't know better.
I didn't know. And I mean, I went through, trying to keep it together is really hard. And, you have to have a certain type of shell. It's like putting together a puzzle because if you don't do it right, it's going to fall apart. And I went through using like plaster of Paris, all kinds of glue and everything like that. And then I left a big thing of acrylic paint open one night and I had left it out. And I thought it was ruined. And when I stuck the paintbrush in it, it was really thick. And I was like, oh, this is like almost like a glue, but it's a paint at the same time. And so then that's when I started. That's what I used to bond it. I just leave my paint out and let it set for a little
bit. What you
bit.
think was a mistake or an oopsie-doopsie on your part turned into being the exact ingredient that you needed for whatever.
Because I can put it on there and I can put it on the bottom and, sculpt it around the shell and it doesn't sit there and drip paint. It stays right where it needs to be until it dries. So that was a really big, and when I figured that out, that's when I got to where I was like, okay, these are worth what they're selling for. And I started posting them on Instagram. That's really where I got
the first start.
The first start
with Chesley George art.
Right.
And we're going to pause there. We're going to dive more into her business now, as well as into her artistic talents and more coming up next. Neshoba County Fair. If you're over at SuperTalk TV, you will see I'm not alone. I have Miss Chesley George of Chesley George Art, and she is making one-of-a-kind centerpieces out of, who knew it, but oyster shells. We got a text message that said, I'm just glad she didn't have to eat all of those oyster shells, particularly since you said through 7 batches over 2 years to get that Chesley George magnolia that you wanted. And so where do you get your oyster shells from?
My daughters and I, we will go all the way from Bagula Battery to Bay St. Louis to dig for shells. And, like I said, if we're along the beach and find one, I'll do that. But my main place is Hopper's Oysters in Pascagoula, and they shuck them and dump them out in their driveway, and that's best for me if they've been sitting out in the sun. I got on Google Earth last year, and I found a big pile in Bay St. Louis over by the Silver Slipper, so I went out there.
Look at you, smart little turkey.
I went out there, and I got a lot of good shells. It did not look like anybody goes out there, so that's what we do.
Are there other shell seekers out there?
I came when I was out at Hopper's at one point. A lady named Miss Linda LaForce, she was out there, and I had never met her before, but she was out there looking for shells, and she said, I want to make a magnolia. There's this girl on Facebook that makes magnolias. I said, oh, really? I said, what's her name? And she was like, I cannot remember it. And she called someone. It ended up being my husband's grandmother that she called. She was like, what is that girl's name that makes those magnolias? And she said,
you made that woman call, get on the phone and call knowing it was you the whole time?
Well, there's a couple other people that have picked up making them, since I've started. So that's why I didn't,
So you want to make sure it was you?
I wanted to make sure.
Did you let the cat out of the bag? Did you tell her it was you?
I did, and I showed her what shells to pick up because she wanted to make one too. So I showed her what shells I like to pick up to construct it.
So what about how big? If they're looking at SuperTalk TV, they can actually see a finished one, which we're going to walk through the process. You brought the different stages, which I love. How about how many shells did it take to create that one?
Let's see. Probably about 13 shells, and it all depends. And that's, when pricing them, it depends because some of them will be smaller and some of them are larger and some are just more intricate. And like this one right here, I brought this because it's hard to find a shell like this with the curve to it. Which a magnolia naturally kind of has in sort of the middle. Curve because, I can take a bunch of shells and put them together and they'll look kind of like a magnolia, but I think that it looks real. It looks like they're falling away from the stem. When they do late after blooming, they start to fall away from the
That's
stem.
Why they smell so good.
Yes.
They smell so good. And that one just looks beautiful. Okay, so let's take us through the process. How long? You said about 13 for a large one there. How long does it take you from start to finish? I mean, I guess if you count in the time to hunt them down.
Right.
But once you have the shells, how long is it taking you to make them, Chelsea?
I would say about 10 hours per piece. And I do them in batches and I do them in steps. So the first step is putting them together. I put this one together yesterday morning and it took me an hour and a half to put this one together. But I was also having to go in and let the dog out and, wrangle kids or whatever. But that one took a little longer than usual. And then after that, I'd go in with a thick paint and I apply that and I let that dry for about a week. And then after that, I do maybe 5 layers of white paint just to really layer it up because if you don't put enough, it'll peel off of the shell. You have to, and if you put too many thin layers, it'll peel off. You have to put thick layers on top.
You really practice this.
Yes, because I've had some mess up like right when I'm about to finish and I realize what I've done and I have to go back. And then after the white, I go ahead and I paint the leaves green, and then I have 2 more steps of using like a darker antique white, and then I have to dry brush you see the pearl on that has to be dry brushed on. And then at the end, I do the gold, and I have a yellow gold on the pine cone in the center of it. But it's about 12 steps all together, and each of those steps can take between 30 and 45 minutes of doing it. So it takes me, like I started a batch in February and I didn't finish some till the end of May. And I don't do large batches anymore. I used to do really big batches, but then I would get really tired of them. So I do about 6 per batch now.
And that way it keeps the joy for you, and then it also,
right.
Keeps them, I guess, something special to get. So do you do them, are you commissioned to do them now, or do you just sort of make them as the oysters find their way to you and then put them out there for the world to have, or is it a mixture of both?
It's a mixture of both. I was saying earlier, when I started posting on Instagram, I would use hashtags, oyster shell art, things like that. So then I had someone message me, and she was from 318 Art Company in Shreveport. And she said, I really want to carry your magnolias. And, I didn't know if it was real at first or what, but I talked to her on the phone, and she sent my contract over. So I started selling them there, and that's where pretty much all of them go now. Around Christmas time, I'll have a small batch for locals if they can get their hands on them, but over in Shreveport, they really sell fast.
And where's the furthest away that you've sold one of your oyster magnolias?
California.
Did you have to ship that bad boy?
I did. And
did you pray the whole way?
I did, and this one was actually a piece that I did. I had cut out the shape of Mississippi, and I wrote with sculpting paint home on it, and the O in it was a small oyster shell magnolia. So, and those used to sell really well, but now I can't find the small shells anymore. They're really hard to find. I had just collected them for so long that I had a lot at once, and then I made all of those, and now I don't have any. So I need to keep track of where I've shipped because they've gone all over.
And are folks primarily finding you for orders, like on social media? Is that kind of,
yes,
or where do you just get? Is it amazing just to have people slide into your DMs and offer you money?
It is. It's wonderful.
most people are sliding in DMs asking for phone numbers and everything else, but Chelsea's got them wanting to buy something, which I think is really good. Someone just said, I want to buy an oyster, and then Debbie wants to know, can you use oyster shells that've been grilled? Does that work? Because she said you could find local restaurants that do that. But
yes, I actually had a friend of mine, Mr. Nolan O'Reilly. He stopped by the other day. He had been somewhere, and I can't remember where he said he was, but he brought me his oysters that had been grilled. So we put them out in the yard, and I let the bugs do the work on cleaning them. But he also brought me a big bucket of them that he had found because he loves my work, and he had texted me and saying that he wanted to bring them. So you can, but a lot of times, like the shells that I like aren't going to be the ones that they grill. It'll be the ones that they take off the top and throw out. So that's what I look for, is ones that have been thrown out.
And Larry in Jackson says, dang, they pave driveways with them near the coast. I feel like we just need to get Chelsea connected with some right oyster, shucking machines somewhere where you can have more options. But then it feels like, you kind of got like an organic kind of thing going on where you find them in your special ways or wherever. Right. And then, you can get too much of a good thing at once, too, because it's only you making these, right? I mean, you don't have like a factory line of them.
Right, it's just me. And that's funny, they pave all kind of driveways and stuff. But after one of the tropical storms a couple years ago, my daughters and I were out on the four-wheeler, and we were in Gaucher, and I saw a tree that had fallen over, and it looked like fungus hanging from the roots. And we got closer, and it was oyster shells. And years ago, they used to mix oyster shells into the dirt before they built houses. And I'm not sure why, but that tree, it was an oak tree that had fallen over that had oyster shells hanging from all of them. And I took them, and I made Christmas ornaments out of those shells.
Man, you've really found sort of your niche. Someone wants to know, can you move the oysters, or is it good to keep them in one place? But no, it's a thing. Like
you can move it. You could probably throw this thing, and it might chip on the edge, but it's not going to come apart.
Can we please not try that?
I'm not going to throw it. But I work really hard to make sure that they are going to stay together. My mom found one after I had started making them. She had found one at a yard sale, and we picked it up, and it just kind of threw.
Not one of yours?
Not one of mine. No, it was just one that somebody had made.
Already from 2019 at a yard sale? Someone didn't know what they had.
It was just hot glued together, and it just fell apart. So they're made to be moved, and if you want to move it somewhere in your house, it's good to go.
And then, too, if you have children, it's one of those things where you don't want to have something that if they touch it, or you just put it up in a special sort of place. This, to me, feels like the perfect welcome home, or like a home warming present, or welcome to Mississippi, wedding gifts.
Right.
Like, that's what this, if you bring this to the wedding shower, everyone's going to be like, ooh and ah, and all of that kind of over it. This isn't the only kind of art you do. I know that you got your hand in a little bit of everything. So we've got more with Chesley George art coming up next. the 28th. Man, October weather feels a lot better, doesn't it, Chelsea?
It does.
Yeah, it does. It feels a whole lot better. Okay, so this is exciting. I mean, you got started, you mentioned back in 2019, and here you are now, less than 3 years later, with a whole new side business. You have an art business now that you never even saw coming from a mom's perspective. I mean, you are a mom of 3 still young girls. I think you mentioned to me 13 to 8. You have a
13, 8, and 3.
13,
no, 4. She's 4. My bad.
13, 8, and 4. It's a big deal. It's a big jump from 3 to 4. And then you have a husband who works as well. How do you juggle it? How do you balance it all? Where do you try to, time management?
I don't do very well at all. It's very stressful.
I really appreciate people who are like, I am a hot mess hanging on by a thread, but we're making it.
Like yesterday when I put that one together, I gave the kids Cheerios and, listened to them scream at each other from inside and fight while I put that together. And it's not always like that, but when school gets back in is really when I'm able to get a lot of work done. Summertime is not a good time for me to work.
Well, that's if you have a magnolia, you better hold on tight to it.
Yes.
But you also do some other art other than your magnolias, which I do think you're on your way of doing what you wanted, which was for someone to pick that up and go, they don't even have to turn it over. That's Chesley George, right? I think you're nailing that. Are you expanding that into other things with the oyster shells, or are you painting other things that aren't that? What else do you do?
So in early 2020, when I was doing this, I was getting really burnt out on the oysters already. Just it was repetitive to just work on that. So I said, we were on lockdown or whatever, had to stay home. And I said, well, I want to pick up painting. So I ordered some paint from Michael's and started watching YouTube videos on painting. And I grew up on a bayou, so I wanted to do marsh paintings. And so those are my really big sellers, are my paintings like that. But, when I started out, they looked terrible. But I worked for 2 years after that. And now I really prefer to paint over these. I like both of them, but painting those marsh scenes or beach scenes or island things like that, those are my favorite things to do.
Okay, winner, chicken dinner, just to let you guys know. Thank you all who chimed in to try to win the pair of tickets to the Chicago concert coming up October 28th. But don't go anywhere all week, because you never know when more tickets will pop up on some of the shows here on SuperTalk. So thank you all for trying to win those. I think what I love, it's one of those things where, you have a hobby and then it takes off, and you could have never in your wildest imaginations think that it would be here in 3 years. And then you get to a point where you have to you feel like sometimes you get the pressure of the world that you have to keep growing, because that's just what you should do if something's on fire. You should just see how big it can burn. But I would say too, you can pump the brakes and try to balance it all. You'll always have that artistic balance. You don't have to feel like you have to,
right.
Be the next, I was trying to think, what's the pottery place in the Delta overnight? You can take your time to sort of get there. Or do you feel the pressure to sort of keep going?
Sometimes I feel the pressure, that's one downfall to some social media is you try to keep up with everybody else, and you try to, they're posting one painting a day. Well, why am I not doing that? I need to get on it. But I try not to do that, and I try to pace myself, and because I catch myself if I am doing one that I'm really not in the mood to do, I'm not going to finish it. I will throw it away. I had a video that I posted on Instagram not long ago where I burned one because I was so mad at trying to do that painting.
Yes! Just light it on fire!
So, and I like to let people know that, it's okay to make mistakes, and I'm not the type to paint over my mistakes. I will completely destroy it.
I feel like we're kindred spirits. We don't even, you don't even know it. But I can totally appreciate that. You also are trying to teach art to others. So I know you got your 3 kids. Does the 13-year-old pick up the art at all, or it's probably the 4-year-old that wants to play in the glue?
All of them. So they all love watercolors, and I love watercolors because they wipe right off the table. And so the 13-year-old, her name's Lucy, and she's fantastic at watercolors. Not long ago, she wanted to make some summer money, so she painted 90s cartoons, and she sold them immediately. We posted them on Facebook, and she sold them. The 8-year-old, her name's Louise, and she likes to draw cartoon characters, and she actually makes up her own characters as well, but she actually does Sharpies. She likes to use Sharpies to do
course
her
she does.
work. Yes. And then the 4-year-old Laura, she likes to watercolor, and she sets her paper up on my easel. She was painting this morning before I left, and she sits there and paints, and she likes to paint aliens and monsters. That's her thing.
What's your thing? It's sort of your thing and can kind of catch wind of it. Do they get that mom is good at art as she is, or do they still just think, this is mom,
They like to brag on me. They know that it's, it's my job to do it. And all of them say, well, I want to be an artist when I grow up. And, I encourage that to them because I wanted to be an artist too, kind of. I didn't think I would be. I used to like to paint a little bit when I was little, but then, going through high school and everything, I never really did much, and then picked it back up, and now I want to be an artist.
You are an artist, Miss Chesley. It says Chesley George Art. It says it in the name of your business and your Facebook page and where everyone can find you. Where did you get who inspired? Was it your mom who had the craftiness? I feel like, crafty and art talent is kind of genetic, like other musical gifts and talents or whatever it may be. Was there someone in your family that kind of had that artsy touch, even if they didn't develop it?
My grandmother, she's always been really good at painting, and growing up, she had a couple of paintings in our house. She had like a lighthouse that she had done, and I always thought it was really cool that she was able to do that. She had taken classes to get to that point. And then my mom, she's not crafty, but she likes that I'm crafty, so that's why she would bring me things so I would be crafty. And then my dad, he also likes that I'm crafty too, and is always offering to help. If we're anywhere, he pulls out his phone, he shows everybody his favorite paintings of mine, has him as a screensaver. He's my hype man.
That's awesome to know that you have that kind of support behind you. And I guess even too, your husband who is a big supporter.
Right. He is. He knew that I wanted to do something. And with him being a junior college football coach, it was just really hard for me to find a job. I wanted to contribute, but I wanted to do something that I enjoy to contribute because he enjoys football. I wanted to find something. So I flip-flopped back and forth on what I wanted to do. And so whenever I found this and he could see how much I enjoyed it, he really pushed for me to keep going. And when I get down and, don't want to create sometimes, he'll, tell me to take a break, put it away, and I'll get back to it. He helps balance me out.
Which I think that's good, and I think that's good encouragement. No matter what your work is in terms of your partnership, sometimes the best advice we can offer the ones we love when they're struggling is just, hey, look, take 5, go for a walk, take a few days, and don't answer any emails, whatever that may be, and just sort of be that balance for each other. And that's when the best art comes out as well. People are asking on the text line, where can they find your art? Where are all the places that you're located? Many want to go find them. Debbie from Ocean Springs wants to know if you're in any of the Ocean Springs merchants. I feel like we need you everywhere, but you're not there yet. And this is still one person,
right,
who's doing the art.
I really just sell myself there at 318 Art Company in Shreveport, a gallery over there. But they can message my Facebook page. I'm really active on my Instagram. That's, my favorite place to share, and that's where I share my process of creating. I'll post the process of my paintings, the magnolias, and everything on my stories there and share it. So those are the two places to contact me if you'd like to buy one.
If you got any questions for Chesley, we got a little bit more with her coming up next. We're wrapping up with our fun conversation with Chesley George. She is an artist originally from Pascagoula, but just moved up here to Goodman because your husband took the job where?
At Holmes Community College. It's assistant head football coach and offensive line coach.
Well, that's good. So y'all got a busy season coming up. So then it shifts, right? Like summer season with the girls out of school, and then school starts back right into football season. So when you say balancing it all and not doing well, I can completely understand that. I was thumbing through your Instagram page, Chesley George Art, during the break, and you have some beautiful paintings. Even Jeff in Oxford texted in and said stunning paintings. What I enjoyed you saying was like the ones that you paint in your highest emotions are the ones that sell the fastest. Has that always just been a good emotional outlet for you in terms of art, whether you're good or bad at it? I mean, it's just a good way for you to sort of release feelings.
It is. It really is. That is, and I don't know when I'm going to get that urge to paint something like that, but usually it'll just come to me, and sometimes it'll be like, I had a dream about something, and I keep a little notebook by my bed, and I'll kind of write that idea down before it, flutters away. But that's the one that you had pulled up. That was the willow tree that looked like a woman, and that was just an emotional painting, and it didn't take me long to paint at all. As soon as I posted it, everybody loved it, and those are my favorite ones to do, but those are my ones that are hardest to let go of. People want them, and I'm like, well, it didn't take me long. I don't know how to price that, and I don't know how to price emotions, to sell them.
But you do.
I do.
Bye, Felicia.
I do.
Well, because that's also the sort of the business part, is it too? I want to do the encouragement part because, here on Good Things, we have stories like yours, and from smaller to larger and in between in terms of success. And I feel like someone listening may think, gosh, I'm crafty, or I have an idea, but I'll never end up like her, or nobody will ever really like what I make, or maybe I'm not getting the traction that, they feel like they should in the beginning. What do you say to those that are, they're makers and creators by nature, but maybe they've got fear or anxiety or, keeping them from stepping out and trying it?
I'd say you just keep going. It's like creating art is like working a muscle. You hear people say, well, I can't draw a stick figure. And I say, well, how many times have you actually tried to draw a stick figure? Because if you do it every day for a year, by the end of that year, you're going to draw a fantastic stick figure. You just have to work at it nonstop, and you take breaks as well. And when you're trying to get people on social media, you don't want to focus on the amount of followers you have. You want to focus on the quality of followers that you have and people that are encouraging you and want your stuff. So you don't have to have, there's these creators that have 30,000 followers and everything, but, what does that matter? If
they're not buying anything,
they're not buying with it. If they're not buying, or if you're not connecting with them, what does it matter? So don't focus on that. You create just to create. And I came across a quote not long ago that said, let me think of it. I'm not in competition with anyone, but I'm inspired by everyone. And that's what, when I see a painting, I try not to compare what I paint to that. I might take a little bit of it, and it might inspire me to create a painting that's similar, but I'm not copying them or anything like that. I'm just inspired by it. And, if somebody sees these magnolias and they want to give it a try, do it. Give it a try.
Good luck.
Good luck. It's hard to get it to this point, but you'll have fun doing it. Make your own that you can have, or make something else. Do ornaments. Ornaments are really fun to do, and people love handmade things at Christmas time. So those are big sellers at Christmas time.
Because if you didn't join us in the beginning, you can catch our conversation with Chesley back in podcast form, wherever you listen to podcasts for Good Things, or on YouTube after the show. But you mentioned it took you, once you recognized that this is something you wanted to do or get better at, for 2 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, you sat at home figuring it out, trial and error, and didn't give it up. So it's, don't miss the work that she put in to get to the point where everybody wants one. I mean, you put in the effort and the trial and the anger. Did you ever take a sledgehammer to one? You said you lit one of your paintings on fire, which I really
did,
appreciate.
And I burned the easel too. And my dad called me. He said, "Let me buy you another easel," because I had just, I had a bad week that week, and I was like, I'm just going to burn all of it. I have not broken one of the magnolias because they're hard to get mad at, like the paintings. I've had one fall off the wall, and I almost chunked it, but then I was able to fix it. So I've been a little more nice to my magnolias.
I feel like you need to go to one of those places that lets you just.
I already know what you're talking about. I would go in there and smash it. I would, and I would enjoy every minute of it.
You know what? I just appreciate that you own it, and then you make these great, delicate, wonderful pieces.
She's come from such an angry person.
That comes from such, but she's. You know what? You figure out how to deal and do, and I absolutely love it. So everyone can check out Chesley George Art on Facebook and Instagram and reach out to you that way.
Yes, that's perfect.
All righty. We appreciate your time, but you guys stick with us. We've got Sports Talk coming up for you next from 3 to 6. Rhino and I will meet you back here tomorrow at 2, but until then, I hope you all find time for the good things.